A bit of background first. I'm Carly. I grew up in North Carolina. My parents both worked long hours. I have an older brother, Dan, who's about 3 years older than me. At the time, he had this recurring stomach problem, appendix related, I think. So there were always random hospital visits, especially in that year. The night this happened, my mom and dad had to rush him to the hospital again. It was a Saturday evening in October, because I had been upset earlier that day about not being able to go to a Halloween thing my friend Megan had invited me to. She had this big sleepover planned, and we were all supposed to carve pumpkins and stay up late watching scary movies. I wasn't allowed to go because my parents wanted me home in case they needed help with my brother. Anyway, around 8 or so, they left for the hospital. My mom told me she'd text me updates. They were in a rush, so there wasn't a big discussion. I think I was in the kitchen making some kind of sandwich when they went out the door. My dad just said, "Lock up, okay?" And I nodded. The thing is, I didn't. At least, not fully. I shut the front door, but didn't actually turn the lock. Our house was one of those one-story ranch-style homes. My bedroom was down a short hallway across from the bathroom. Dan's room was next to mine, but he kept his door closed most of the time because he was messy. My parents' room was on the other side of the house near the living room. So after they left, I made my sandwich and went into my room. I was a big gamer back then, still am honestly. So I booted up my computer. I remember I was eating Doritos and drinking a Diet Coke while playing The Sims 3. It was pouring outside by then, steady rains, where you can hear it tapping on the windows and the gutters outside sloshing. I actually liked that kind of weather because it made the house feel cozy. I had half closed my bedroom door. Not all the way shut, just pulled it so there was maybe a foot-wide gap because I didn't like feeling completely closed in when I was home alone. About an hour later, something happened that I didn't pay much attention to at first. While I was clicking around in the game, I thought I heard this sound, almost like someone clearing their throat or trying to whisper. I assumed it was from the game, but there wasn't any sound like that in The Sims. I took my headphones off, paused, and listened. The rain was hitting the roof hard enough that it was tricky to make out other sounds. After a minute of just sitting there staring at my monitor, I shrugged it off, thinking it was the pipes or something outside. I put my headphones back on, and a little while later, I realized the door behind me was wider than I'd left it. I could see out of the corner of my eye in the reflection on my monitor. When I had sat down, the door was pulled in enough that I could barely see the hallway light. Now it was completely open, pushed against the wall. That made me stop playing. I spun around in my chair and just looked at it. I know for sure I hadn't opened it all the way. I half closed it because I specifically remember wanting that bit of a barrier between me and the rest of the house. I got up, heart racing a little, and walked to the door. The hallway was empty. I closed the door again, a little tighter this time, but not locked. Then I went back to my chair, telling myself it was just the draft or the air vents. A few minutes later, I started hearing this wet sound, like someone stepping on a soaked sponge or dragging shoes through mud, like little shifts of weight. It was faint, but definitely not the rain. I muted my game and sat completely still. The sound stopped. Then it started again, closer, like right outside my room. I froze up. I remember every detail because of how tense I was. The smell of the Doritos on my desk, the fizz of the Diet Coke can, the faint hum of my computer's fan. And then there was a sudden flash of light across the hallway. It wasn't lightning. It was too direct, too sharp. It looked exactly like a flashlight beam. The light swept past my door and vanished. I panicked. I just slid off my chair as quietly as I could and crawled under my bed. It wasn't very high off the floor, so I had to flatten myself against the carpet. My hands were shaking. I had to clamp them over my mouth just to stop myself from making noise. The wet, squishy sound came again, right outside my door. The light flashed through the crack under the door, moving back and forth. I could hear something dripping, like water hitting the floor. I stayed under the bed for what felt like forever. I couldn't see anything except the little bit of light spilling across the carpet. My eyes were burning from crying, and my chest hurt from trying to breathe as quietly as possible. At one point, the sound stopped completely. just the rain outside and my own heartbeat thudding in my ears. Hours must have passed. I don't know exactly how long, but I remember my phone buzzing on the desk above me at least twice with texts from my mom. I couldn't move to grab it. Hours later, I heard the garage door opening. My dad's truck. I stayed under the bed until I heard my mom calling my name from the kitchen. Only then did I crawl out. When I stepped into the hallway, mud everywhere. Thick, dark footprints all over the carpet leading from the front door down the hall. And right in front of my bedroom doorway was a huge puddle of wet mud, like whoever it was had just stood there for a long time. My dad saw it at the same time I did. He shouted for my mom and immediately grabbed the phone to call the police. I told them what happened, though honestly, it all blurred together when I was trying to explain it. The cops came. They didn't find anyone in the house or around the neighborhood. Nothing was stolen. How the footprints ended at my doorway, like someone had just stood there, watching me through the crack in the door while I sat at my desk. I don't know how long they were in the house before I even noticed anything. This happened when I was 19. I was at that age where I thought I knew everything, but in reality, I didn't know anything at all. I had just finished my first year of college, and one of my friends from high school invited me to a camping trip. It wasn't camping in the traditional sense. It's like a big party in the woods. Somebody's cousin had this spot near a river, not far from town, where people would park their trucks, set up tents, and blast music until the sun came up. There must have been at least 30 people there the night it happened. Most of them I didn't even know. There were coolers stacked with beer, bags of chips spilling open, somebody trying to grill hot dogs on a rusty little propane grill. The whole area smelled like smoke, sweat, and cheap alcohol. Everyone's laughing too loud, tripping over roots, and pretending they aren't as drunk as they are. I was with my friend Kayla. She was the kind of girl who could talk to anybody. Blonde hair, denim jacket, always smiling. She was the one who convinced me to go in the first place. At some point, she leaned close to me, shouting over the music, and said, "Hey, do you think we could find a little something extra tonight?" She didn't say the word out loud, but I knew what she meant. Not the usual stuff people bring to parties, but something stronger, something to take the edge off. I was hesitant at first, but I went along with it. And that's when we met him. He wasn't really blending in with the crowd. I remember he was standing a little apart from everyone else, leaning against a tree. Tall, late 20s, early 30s, plain black hoodie and jeans. His hair was buzzed close, and he had this sharp jawline with a thin little goatee. He wasn't laughing like everyone else. Kayla noticed him before I did. She asked him straight up if he had what we were looking for. He didn't even blink. He just said, "Yeah, I've got it. My car's over that way. Follow me." We were both a little buzzed, but not enough to be stumbling. At that age, your judgment's already not great, and alcohol doesn't help. Still, we followed him. He led us down one of the dirt trails that branched off from the main clearing. I could still hear the music fading behind us as we walked. His car was parked like 50 yards away, a dark-colored car. Could have been navy, could have been black, the kind of car you'd never look at twice in a parking lot. He popped open the driver's side door, leaned in, and came back holding a small bag. No awkwardness, like he'd done this 100 times before. Kayla gave him some cash, and we both headed back toward the party. That was it. No weird vibes, no immediate red flags, just a quick deal. But maybe an hour later, Kayla said she was going to find him again. I told her to wait, that we didn't need more, but she just laughed it off, said she'd be right back. She never came back. I didn't even notice. With that many people around, it was easy to lose track. I figured she was flirting with some guy, or maybe she'd wandered down to the river. It wasn't until another half hour passed that I started getting worried. I asked around, but no one had seen her. I went back to the trail, walked toward where his car had been, and saw nothing. He wasn't there, neither was she. When I finally asked him, because he'd reappeared back in the clearing later that night, he just said she'd gone back to the party after they were done. Said maybe I just missed her. His voice was flat, like he was reciting lines he'd practiced. By then, a few of my other friends noticed how upset I was, and they helped me look. We checked the river, the tents, walked down the gravel road leading back toward the main highway. Nothing. Then one of the guys, I think his name was Duke, said he heard something. He'd been walking past the cars and he swore he heard gagging or coughing, like somebody puking. It was faint, but it was coming from that guy's car. We all went over there together. There must have been 4 or 5 of us. Trevor banged on the trunk, hard, and we all heard it then. A muffled retching sound. We demanded he open it. At first he laughed, literally laughed, like it was a joke. Then he fumbled with his keys, and for a second I thought he might run. But he didn't. He opened the trunk. Kayla was inside. She was on her side, wrists bound with plastic ties, a rag stuffed in her mouth. Her eyes were wide open, tears streaking down her face. She looked drugged out of her mind, barely conscious but alive. The second the trunk opened, everything went to hell. People started shouting, someone pulled Kayla out, and in all the chaos, he was gone. I don't even remember seeing him run. We carried Kayla back to the clearing. By then, half the party was too drunk to process what was happening. Some people kept saying to call the cops, but no one actually did. Too many people had stuff they didn't want the police finding out about. I kept telling them we had to do something. Kayla was barely able to keep her eyes open, but she kept shaking her head, like she didn't want cops involved either. Finally, I grabbed her arm and told her we were leaving. I found another girl I trusted, Marissa, and together we half walked, half carried Kayla back to my car. We drove her home. For a while, that was it. She never wanted to talk about it again. She told me later she couldn't remember much after walking to his car the second time. Just fragments. His voice, the sound of a trunk slamming shut. And I might have left it at that, tried to move on, if it hadn't been for what happened a few nights later. I was in my room, getting ready for bed. I had my window cracked open because it was hot that night. I was pulling off my shirt, and that man, he was standing right outside my window. The same man, staring in. I screamed, dropped to the floor, and grabbed my phone. By the time I looked again, he was gone. This time, I called the cops. They came, not a single footprint in the dirt. I decided to call Kayla. I didn't want to be alone with my thoughts. My hands were still shaking when I punched in her number, and when she answered, I could hear it in her voice before she even said anything. She'd been holding her breath. "Hey," I said, my voice cracked halfway through. "Hey," she replied softly. "Are you okay?" I don't know," I admitted. "I mean, yeah, the cops were here, but Kayla, he was outside my window. Just standing there. I don't even know how he..." My words tumbled over each other. There was a pause. "Oh my God," she said. "I think he's doing this to both of us. Maybe he knows where we live now. I'm so sorry." I shook my head even though she couldn't see me. "No, it's not your fault. I don't understand. How would he even know?" We talked for hours, pacing the line between practical ideas and wild paranoia. Maybe someone had seen us the night of the party. Maybe he had followed Kayla afterward. Maybe he just knew. We couldn't figure it out. Every idea felt more terrifying than the last. By the time I hung up, it was nearly dawn. I hadn't moved from my bed. My muscles were stiff, my eyes raw, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I finally tried to sleep, curled up under the blankets. Then, one night, I had been trying to fall asleep, lying on my side, counting the faint sounds of the street outside. The house was silent, and I saw something strange. My bedroom window was open. I could swear I had closed it. Then I heard the front door open softly. My stomach dropped to my feet, footsteps coming up the hallway. I could hear the shuffle of shoes on the hardwood. Then he was in my room, the same man. Hoodie, dark jeans, the same thin goatee. He stepped inside like he belonged there. My brain screamed at me to run, to scream, to do anything, but I felt frozen in place. "Hey," he said softly. His voice had that same flat, practiced quality. "Calm down. I don't want to hurt you. I just have to make sure you stay quiet." I stumbled backward, my back hitting the edge of the bed. My hands shook, my chest felt like it was going to explode. I tried to run, but my foot caught on the blanket, and I fell hard. Pain shot through my ankle, and I screamed. He lunged forward, or maybe just moved faster than I expected. I saw him reach out, and I braced myself, but then he hit the sharp corner of my bedside table with his stomach. There was a grunt, a snap of pain, and his whole body jerked back. For a second, everything froze. I was on the floor, crying, screaming, terrified beyond words. But I could see him clutching his stomach, his legs wobbling under him. Pain twisted his face in a way I hadn't seen before, and for a moment he wasn't this unstoppable figure anymore. He was just human. And he ran. He limped, holding his stomach, shoving himself toward the door. His movements were frantic, desperate, but he was still fast enough to disappear down the hallway and out of sight. Eventually I found the courage to crawl to the window and pull it closed. Then I called Kayla. She answered immediately. "What happened?" she asked, panic creeping into her voice. He got in," I said, my voice breaking. "He came in through the front door. I tried to run, but I fell, and he hit the corner of the table. He's gone now, I think." "Are you okay?" she asked, and I could hear her running down the line, heart racing. "I think so. I don't know," I said, still on the floor. I can't believe he found me." I called the police again. I gave them every detail, how he had entered my home, what he had said, how he had hit the table and limped away. They promised to send officers around, to check my neighborhood, to look for patterns, but as before, nothing came of it. It was like he had vanished into thin air. Kayla and I never went to another party like that again. We stopped even talking about the woods or the guy. We just moved on as best we could. But I never forgot him. I never forgot how fast he could appear, how quiet he was, how terrifyingly normal he looked until you realized what he could do. And I know that if he ever comes back, I'll be ready. But part of me knows that nothing could ever really prepare you for someone like that. I've learned a lot since that night about fear, about vigilance, about how fragile safety really is. But I've also learned this. Some people are just predators. And sometimes you can do everything right, and it still isn't enough. I don't usually write into channels like this, but your videos kinda reminded me of something from when I was younger. I grew up in this town in the Midwest. Pretty boring place for the most part. Before I get into it, I should explain a little. My name's Jared, married, 2 kids, work as a delivery driver, so most of my days are just driving around. Back then, though, when this happened, I was around 13 or 14. My sister was a year younger than me. Her name's Danielle. We were both the kind of kids who just wandered around town because there wasn't much else to do. No mall, no theater. You either hung out at the park, someone's basement, or walked around places you probably shouldn't be, like the cemetery. The cemetery was old. The oldest section was all crooked stones. Some names faded so much you couldn't read them anymore. My grandma used to tell me there were Civil War veterans buried there, and that if you walked through at night, you could hear boots crunching on gravel even if no one was there. I never believed her. She was the type to tell us ghost stories just to make us go to bed. Everybody in town knew that place was, I don't know, off. Like 2 people actually died there under really weird circumstances. The first one was when I was maybe 8. My parents didn't tell me much. A guy in his 20s was found slumped against one of the newer headstones. They said he looked like he just sat down and died. No marks on him, no sign of a fight, no drugs, nothing. Just dead. Then a few years later, a girl from the high school was found there too. Same kind of deal, no reason, no wounds. I remember walking past the cemetery the week after it happened, and somebody had left flowers at the gate. Like she wasn't even buried there, but they wanted to mark the spot anyway. So yeah, the place had a reputation. People would dare each other to walk through at night, or to knock on one of the stone angels 3 times, stuff like that. I never did. I wasn't brave. But me and Danielle would sometimes walk the road that ran along the cemetery fence if we were bored, mostly in the evenings when the sun was going down. That's where this happened. One particular evening sticks out. Danielle and I had walked to the gas station earlier to get Slurpees. They used to have this blue raspberry flavor that would stain your tongue bright blue, and we decided to take the long way home. That meant walking down the street, which curved past the cemetery. I was wearing this ratty old Cubs hat my uncle had given me, and Danielle was carrying a plastic bag with some chips in it, the kind of sour cream and onion chips that make your fingers stink for the rest of the night. We weren't really talking much, just arguing a little about whether we should stop at our friend's house. But he wasn't home. The sun was low. The cemetery was on our left, behind a tall chain-link fence that had patches of rust near the bottom. I remember there were a couple of crows perched on the telephone wires, making that harsh cawing noise that just keeps repeating. Anyway, as we were walking, I saw something inside. It was just a person sitting down. They were perched on one of the larger gravestones, the kind that looks more like a block than a flat marker. Their back was straight, knees pulled in just a little, and they were facing the road. I slowed down. Danielle didn't even notice at first. She was busy trying to open her bag of chips. But this person, or thing, I don't know, was just sitting there. I'll never forget it. It looked like a man at first, maybe in a dark coat or something, but the more I stared, the harder it was to figure out. It could have been a woman, too. The hair was strange, kind of long but uneven, like clumps. The face, I don't know how to describe it, was just fixed on us. Not like someone watching casually, but like locked in. I said, "Danielle, do you see that?" She glanced up, squinted, then shook her head. "See what?" I pointed. "On the stone." She looked again. "There's nothing there." That's when I realized she really couldn't see it. I don't mean she was ignoring me. I mean her eyes didn't register anything. Meanwhile, I could see it plain as day. The figure didn't move. Sat there staring at us as we walked by. Up until that moment, it had just smelled like hot pavement and grass, but suddenly it was like wet soil, like when you dig up a patch of earth after rain. I just grabbed Danielle's arm and told her we should hurry. She laughed and pulled her arm back, saying I was being dumb, but I walked faster anyway. As soon as we passed the cemetery and turned the corner, the normal sounds came back. Crickets, cars in the distance, even Danielle crunching her chips. I looked back once and the gravestone was empty. I didn't tell my parents because I knew they'd just say I was imagining stuff. Danielle teased me the next day, calling me ghost boy and making spooky noises. But it wasn't just a trick of light or something. It was real. Apparently, other people had spotted a man or woman sitting on graves, usually at dusk, staring at whoever walked by. No one ever caught the person. No one ever got close. When I visit my hometown with my wife and kids, I avoid that road. I drive the extra block just so I don't have to see the cemetery. My sister doesn't remember that night at all, at least not the way I do. She insists I was just trying to scare her. But I know the silence, the smell, the way everything froze. Those two people who died there, maybe they saw it too. Maybe they sat down like it wanted them to, and they never got up again.